Equipment that's prone to failure, you need to be prepared for this. Mike Danielson spoke a lot about standing rigging. Here we have a wonderful picture of the kind of failure you get in your chain plates. Take a look at the bottom of your chain plates. If you see little trickles of rust coming out, you probably ought to pull the chain plates and have them more carefully inspected, because you're at risk. Running rigging chafe, I've talked about. You're going to get chafe, and you're going to be careful with it. Sails. Inspect your sails. Sew up the little problems before they become big problems. If you don't know how to sew your sails, it doesn't really matter. You'll figure it out at the time. Water maker. There was a water maker man a week ago, talked about your water maker is going to fail. It's only a question of if it's going to fail at a convenient time or at a near time or a late time. Your water maker is going to fail. And what that means to me is, even though I have a huge water capacity and a very high capacity water maker, I run it every day if I'm relaxed every other day, so that the water tank is always topped off. So when the water maker fails, I have over 100 gallons of water on board, which will take me, when I revert to just drinking it instead of wasting it, washing with it, that's will last us a long time. Gen sets, we saw on the rally of these 40 boats, a lot of gen set failures. Think about in advance, how is your boat going to work without a gen set? Unfortunately, the way my boat is built, if there's no gen set, there's no water maker. So the gen set was a little more critical to me. Fortunately, it failed in a way that I could fix pretty easily. It failed by breaking a coolant pipe hose. All of the coolant drained out into the pan underneath the gen set. I could fix that one hose, put it all back together. This was on a passage from Brazil back to Grenada. We were doing over 200 miles a day. The boat is just roaring through the water. We're having a great time. And the generator overheats, runs to a stop. I go around, so the boat is just tearing along, and I've got my head in the engine room fixing this gen set. A lot of people have contaminated fuel problems. Kathy and I did not have contaminated fuel problems, but before we left, we had the guy with the high pressure washer spray around and try and knock all of the bits and pieces out of the tanks. A lot of people have shortwave problems. What happens is, if you have a kind of marginal installation, any kind of corrosion that happens, and the corrosion will happen, makes your shortwave not work, and you were kind of relying on it for weather and other things, so it's kind of uncomfortable when it doesn't work. Kathy and I carried a sat phone as a backup to the shortwave. A sat phone, how many of you carry sat phones? How many of you had trouble making your sat phone work? Well, yeah, it is more reliable than a shortwave. This is not saying very much. You know, you have to fight with your shortwave a lot of the time to get it to hook up. So we carry a sat phone as a backup to our shortwave, and so we can always get the weather. Things that you can do to increase your risk. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do these things, but understand that if you choose to single hand, that's a greater risk than if you have a bigger crew. If you choose to race, it's a bigger risk. And you see, when you go online and you look at these videos of sailing catastrophes, they're almost always racing. These guys that go out, and they go out in a nice 50-knot breeze, and you see they got a full spinnaker up, and they're tearing along at 35 miles an hour. It's a risky operation. It's perfectly all right if you know in advance and you accept the risk. Another risk, deferred maintenance. Now, people defer the maintenance because they don't know they should do the maintenance, they don't care about doing the maintenance, or they don't have enough money for doing the maintenance, but it always simply is an increased risk. If you don't change the oil on your engine, it will continue to run probably another 1,000 hours. and then it will fail at some very inconvenient and unexpected time. So try and keep up with your maintenance. Moving on to a deeper level, let's say you hear about a boat runs aground on a reef. Who has heard of a boat running on a reef? Boat lost on a reef? Yes, not an uncommon occurrence. And sometimes you just stop there, but let's ask, why did the boat run on the reef? Well, there are two primary reasons that boat runs on a reef. The first can be categorized as poor navigation, and the second can be categorized as poor anchoring technique. So the boat can be, poor navigation might be inattention, it might be the chart was bad, but you didn't know that the chart was bad. Well, that's what we call poor navigation. You should know that the chart was no good. And I can tell you in advance, for those of you who press on to Fiji, the chart to the ship container docks is excellent. Everything else is sort of fictional. So your job is to go out on the bow and look at where you're going. So experience tells you you just have to cope with chart inaccuracy, misunderstanding of chart plotters. Nobody here does celestial navigation, but the important value of celestial navigation is when you get a celestial position that it's within a mile. That's your best bet. So you don't say that rock is over there, I can go around on this side or that side. You only have a very approximate position. GPS tells you absolutely where you are. Unfortunately, the chart may not be in the right place. Kathy and I, when we first came down here, the chart to the entrance to this marina was over a mile off. So you get in close, you have to just eyeball it in. I understand the charts here are now pretty good. Okay, poor anchoring technique. Well, so you get to Nuka Hiva after 3 weeks and you throw the anchor over and you go on shore and you get checked in and you have yourself a nice dinner, and maybe you were in a hurry and you didn't really set that anchor hard, and you really have to be a little careful to think about these things and always be very, very anal about doing your anchoring when you get to your destination. Well, the Coast Guard categorizes these kinds of things as contributing factors. And they have wonderful statistics on contributing factors. And the number one is what they would call operator inattention or improper lookout. That is what we all do. We're kicking back in the cockpit. We haven't seen anything for 5 minutes. We're going to just kind of read a book or do something else. We're not really watching where we're going, and we run into something. And you're going to do that. The only good news is that there's very little to run into, so you're probably safe. Next, operator inexperience. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And their third is alcohol use. They also have a category of a contributing factor of excessive speed. I don't think this applies to sailboats. My father-in-law was a private pilot, and he recounts a story of when people are getting their private pilot licenses, when they're first learning how to fly and they do their solos, they are extremely careful, and very few people get into trouble on their first couple of flights. And a guy who's been flying for 10 years and has 1,000 hours under his belt, he knows what he's doing, and he never gets into trouble. At the 200-hour level, people get a little bit of confidence and they start to fly a little bit beyond their ability, and they get into trouble. So you have this very low incidence of accident, and then you have this peak, and then it drops off again. And I want you to think about where you are in your experience level. And so the key is, if you're at the 200-hour level, pretend you're at the 10-hour level and continue to be careful. Continue to be careful. Anyhow, I translate these Coast Guard things into these underlying causes. I call them the 3 Ins: inattention, inexperience, and intoxication. And I've counted these mascots for these 3 items. This is my man for inattention, inexperience, and invented a new dwarf, intoxication. So, beginning to sum up here, when you think about managing the risks, prepare your boat, get a safety equipment checklist, go through it carefully even if you don't buy all this stuff. Learn some techniques. Be careful with your anchoring. Back down your anchor. Put out enough scope. Even if it's crowded, you can really set your anchor and then pull it in a little bit. Don't get too tired. Here is where your watch system is actually an important safety feature. Make sure that people are getting the rest they need. Make sure that you adjust your watch system to fit people's individual needs. Don't drink underway. In terms of equipment, get PFDs you're actually going to wear with tethers and strobes and some sort of locating device to save you from going overboard. Few misconceptions. Don't be careful. Don't think that being underway is dangerous and being at anchor or moored or at the dock is safe. Most of the people that I have spoken to who have personal experience of personal knowledge of people who have been seriously injured or killed on a sailboat, the boat was not sailing. We know a man who was coming back to his boat, slipped between the dock and the boat. Nobody was around to know he was there, and he drowned. I thought, this guy must have been pretty uncoordinated until just a couple of months ago at Annapolis. I got up in the morning, this dock was wet, I stepped off, my foot went out from under me, and splash. And I'm thinking that the reason that I'm still here is because I was more lucky than the other guy because I did not hit my head. Don't think that because you were lucky that makes you smart. You've got to remember that being lucky is important. Handling man overboard is going to be not like you expected. It's going to be much more ad hoc. Be prepared. Comfort on board is a factor in safety. Make sure people are rested. Make sure people are well fed. Make sure people are ready to cope and are sober to be able to cope with an emergency should you need them. I want to say about diesel, in the same way that electrical insulation can get brittle, fuel hoses can get a little bit brittle too. So you go in to do some work on your engine, you lean on a fuel hose, you put a little kink in it. Well, you get done and the kink goes away, you don't see anything, but that kink might have put two little pinholes in the sides of your fuel hose. And as soon as the fuel pump comes on, pressurizes that, you get this wonderful mist of diesel fuel and it will burn like crazy. It's as good as gasoline as a fire hazard. To wrap up, we've talked about risks, some of the risks, psychology of risks, likelihood of degree versus degree of danger. Prevention can make the unfortunate less likely. Preparation can make the important event less dangerous. Captains, make your own risk assessment, make your own judgment, share your reasons with the crew. Don't go say, I don't need this piece of safety equipment, while the rest of your crew doesn't know why. And with a little luck, we can convert you from this guy to the happy sailing couple. I'd like to refer you all to the website that Kathy and I are building. It has a lot of useful information on it. Everything is free. There is no advertising. worldsailing.guru. There are a number of articles, some videos to help you, the blogs, and as I say that, if the video for this presentation is good, then we'll be able to post it and refer it to other people on the Puddle Jump as well. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the Vallarta Yacht Club for providing the venue. Rudy, thank you, Rudy. Again, invite you to The World Sailing Guru, like World Sailing Guru on Facebook, you get notifications as we add new things to the yacht, to the website. Thanks again. I hope you have a lot of questions because we do have a little bit of time left.